Hi, my name's Mike O'Leary. I'm alongside with Robert Elliott. In this video today, we are going to be explaining the differences and similarities between a able-bodied standing pickleball player and a wheelchair adaptive pickleball player. Remember, that's how I roll.
All right, so what we're going to talk about is the similarities, whether you're standing or in a chair, when you're at the kitchen line and hitting the ball and the body positioning. So as a standing player, you always want to be facing your target and making sure you're always ready for the shot. So anytime the ball's hit to the left side, we simply pivot. And then we come back to the ready position. Anytime the ball's to our right side, we're going to pivot with our other foot, always allowing us to be facing our target so we can respond in case we pop the ball up, and never turning to one side so we can get caught or anything. And how's that similar, Mike, when you're in a chair?
Well, it's very similar. You're trying to accomplish the same goals. The only difference is that with a wheelchair, if you're facing straight on to the net, you are very limited as to how far you can reach over for a backhand. So the goal as a right-handed player, in my case, try and face my wheelchair at 10 o'clock to the net. By doing that, I have a much longer reach across my left side for my backhand shot. I also still have the ability to make my forehand shots with a long reach. And also with the angle to the net at 10 o'clock, I have a much better opportunity to return shots that come down to my feet. And people target people in wheelchairs thinking that our feet, well, it's very similar.
Yeah, it's our target standing also.
Standing player, but we're even more vulnerable in a wheelchair because we have such a wide stance. We have really wide feet. So we're trying to, by turning to an angle, we give ourselves an opportunity to return a shot with power as well as better angle. If we're straight on, we have we have very little ability when the ball comes to our feet to have any power to return the shot, and we tend to flip the paddle, which is something you want to avoid. You want to keep that firm wrist and get your shoulder involved in it for any kind of power.
So that's really curious, because that's exactly the same way for standing. So we always want to make sure, and as you're hitting that, you can see just using your shoulder, which is identical, and we always want a firm wrist too. You never want to flick your wrist when you're hitting. So it's pretty much, we're positioning ourselves the same, except you're at a 10 o'clock instead of we're facing, but we're swinging and hitting exactly the same.
Correct.
We just talked about some of the similarities between standing and being in a chair, but there are a few differences, minor, but there are a few differences. So for a standing player, we're going to actually stand right up to the kitchen line. So therefore, we can take the ball out of the air as much as we can. And also, we only have one bounce. So that's some of the differences for us, that we have to be careful of that line with our feet and trying to take it out of the air in only one bounce. And how's that the same or different when you're in the chair?
Well, in a chair, I have found that it's more effective for me when I'm at the kitchen, I'm actually back about 10 to 12 inches from the kitchen. There are several reasons for that. In a wheelchair, we are allowed 2 bounces. The second bounce gives us an opportunity. Here's one thing I always think about. There are a wide range of abilities and so-called disabilities. Not everyone in the wheelchair has the same ability as another. They're depending on whatever their issues are. So some cannot move as quickly as others. I happen to be fairly able-bodied, and I very rarely use the second bounce.
Yeah, I see that when we play, you really don't. You really try to get it on the first bounce.
No. So I've had a few people say to me, well, that's an advantage. Well, my response to that is twofold. The second bounce is not an easy shot because it's usually very low. Pickleball doesn't bounce high. It's a difficult shot. And secondly, it's not a, it's very hard to make it a put away shot.
All right. It's just to get the ball back, really, is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it allows you to reset like what we do. Anytime we're out of balance, out of position, we just reset, hit the ball straight ahead. So whenever it's a second bounce, it's almost like it's just a reset for you guys.
Correct.
Yeah.
People are targeting your feet, as they are even if you're a standing player, they're targeting your feet a lot of the time. But if you're effective and you're at your angle, as we were talking about earlier, you will pick up the ball just as easily if you're 10 to 12 inches back. You also have the opportunity, if the ball comes short over the net, you still get 2 bounces. So you can approach the net.
So you're not losing any time by being back, because you have time to get those short balls.
Correct. So, and the other thing that I was thinking about too, and I found people very often ask, well, what do you do about lobs? Well, if you're at the kitchen and you're 10 to 12 inches back and you pull back hard on your push bars, which now are becoming your pull bars, you can effectively get back in time to reach most lobs. So I don't usually ask my standing partner to take a lob. If I really feel like I'm out of position and I see a lob's going to come over way deep in the back of the court, I will often tell them, take it. And at that point we switch. When you're standing at the kitchen line with a wheelchair, we have 2 small wheels at the front of our wheelchair called the casters. Those, if we are going to volley a shot, we are allowed to touch and cross the kitchen line before volleying the ball back to our opponents. If our back wheels or our large wheels touch or cross that line, it's the same as a kitchen fault for a standing player.
So pretty much the big wheels are the same as standing people's feet. Okay.
People often ask about propelling. Where do you hold your paddle when you're propelling? In the beginning, it was kind of a funny story. The first time I sat in the chair, I placed the paddle in my lap and I started pushing. And the guy started throwing balls at my head and he says, put that paddle in your hand. And I said, well, how do I get around? And he said, how do you get ready for a shot if you have it in your lap? And I said, so you take the grip, and this is what I do. I use over grips all the time. They're stickier and tackier than a regular grip. And I place my hand in the normal grip that I would use to hit the ball, place the sticky part of the handle on the push bar.
So you're actually using it like your hand.
It's like my hand now, and I use that as my grip.
One thing too, when we were playing, and I actually was in the chair and everything, that I found with preparation is when you swing, it actually makes the chair spin around. So you have to be able to hit the ball and prevent the chair from spinning, which I found was actually pretty difficult.
Yes, you have to remember, and beginners very often will push to get ready for a shot. They'll let go of their push bars and take a shot, and they lose power for one thing, because as you swing, the chair moves, so you're losing that. You don't have the footing.
Right.
So I try as much as I can to keep my hands, at least one hand on the chair when I go to hit, to keep them spinning and to enable me to have some power. So in summary, I'd like to thank everyone for following me in my videos. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been helpful and possibly you have learned a few things, and everyone can adapt and learn and play and have fun. And just want to thank you all again, and remember that this is how I roll.